And good evening, Pittsburgh Steelers fans. Welcome to another episode of Steelers Six Pack with Tony. I believe that's a new name. And I welcome you and thank you for joining me on this lovely Friday night as I'm doing the show in Pittsburgh. It's warm, it's humid, but it's also July 22nd as I'm sitting here right now. So that's not a surprise. That's to be expected. And as I always say, wherever you are, I hope it's a great and pleasant and less humid evening or morning or afternoon in Steeler Nation, wherever you happen to be. And before I continue, as always, I'd like to ask you to please like and subscribe to our Behind Steel Curtain YouTube channel. We bring you live shows each and every day and night. If you were paying attention, if you were tuning in earlier, you saw that we had the Touchdown Under show at 5 p.m. EST, starring Maddie Peverall and Mark Davison. And of course, there's this show. We Run the North with Kevin Tate. We have The Hangover on Monday with Brian Anthony Davis and Shannon White. We have Steelers Preview with Jeff Hartman and Brian and Dave Schofield. We have the Scobro show with Dave and his brother Rich. We have what's it called now? I forget. The show with Jeffrey Benedict and Shannon. Oh gosh, my mind's is mush. Bad language over the weekend. We have Steelers Q&A. Those both of those shows are on Sunday. And of course, you can catch all those shows live on Facebook also. And as always, you can catch all those shows after the fact in audio form on any audio platform of your choosing, whether it be Spotify, Google, you name it, you can find our stuff. It's a growing podcast family, and you will not be sorry. And we have a whole host of audio-only shows, including From the Cutting Room Floor with Jeffrey Benedict, Let's Ride with Jeff Hartman, The Stat Geek with Dave Schofield, What Ian's Talking About with Kyle Kreis, The Steelers Fix with Andrew Wilbar and Jeremy Betts, and the list goes on. We have a whole host of those shows as well, and you can catch those on any audio platform. And please check out Behind Steel Curtain, the website. Excuse me, we bring you news, commentary, film breakdown. Anytime there's breaking news, anytime there's a controversy or a trade or just a interesting story, we'll have it for you. So please check that out. And let's welcome everybody into the live chat. Let's see who we have tonight. We have who was first in, Steelers Pittsburgh. And they say, Steeler Nation, thumbs up. We have Steeler Chick 46, Kathy Forrid, George Teston. And Steelers Pittsburgh says, I liked your article about Mason Rudolph's birthday. More on that later. Margarita Martinez Vera is with us. That's a new name, and they join us from Facebook. So welcome. Reginald Rivers, a mainstay. He joins us from YouTube. Just Me joins us from YouTube, and she says, hey, family. All right. And before I get into the nuts and bolts of tonight's show, I want to continue with our new segment, and that's the Steelers six-pack of questions. And as I've been doing the last couple of weeks, I have 4 from Jeff Hartman and 2 from me. And I tried to get the banner up again tonight. I'm going to have to go over this with Brian. I wanted to do that, but he's been on vacation. So I'll have to go over this and figure out a way to have these questions scroll across the bottom of the screen as the show progresses. But I'll try to keep these questions pretty concise for you to remember. Question number 1 from Jeff. It's the last Friday night six-pack of the 2022 offseason. If you could describe the Steelers offseason in one word, what would that be? Number 2, when do you consider the Steelers offseason to be over? When they report the training camp, when the pads go on, the first preseason game, or are you a purist and none of those things matter and it's week 1 of the regular season when it really goes from one season to another? Question 3. This is why it takes me forever. The whole banner thing might not work. There's just these are too wordy. we'll have to come up with a new concept maybe. Anyway, question number 3. Ben Roethlisberger recently revealed that it was Art Rooney II that wanted him back in 2021, and general manager Kevin Colbert was ready to move on last season, meaning 2021. Roethlisberger also said he would have been willing to come back again in 2022. When it comes to Roethlisberger's departure, do you think he stayed too long, left too soon, or was it the right timing for 2021 to be his last season? Number 4. There have been a number of teams introducing variations of the helmets they will wear for a game or two in 2022, the alternate helmets, if you will. If the Steelers were to do an alternative helmet, what would you want it to be? Would you want it to be white, gold, or some other color? Those are just 4 questions, and I have 2 of my own. Number 5, the offensive line. The 5 projected starters right now are Dan Moore Jr. at left tackle, Kevin Dotson at left guard, Mason Cole at center, James Daniels at right guard, and Shuk Okorafor at right tackle. Do you think those 5 will be the starting 5 at the start of the season? Question number 6. Larry Ogunjobi, the recently acquired defensive lineman, Tyson Alualu, and Cam Hayward are projected to be the starting defensive linemen. And I know there's a lot of mixing and matching that goes on, a lot of different packages, but those 3 are expected to be the starters in the quote-unquote base defense. Do you see anybody challenging either Ogunjobi or Alualu for their jobs? Obviously, Cam is safe. So those are the 6 questions. Now, and then we will go over them at the end of the show. Now, let's talk about the big news of Friday, and that was the Ron Cook column in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, his interview with Ben Roethlisberger, fittingly enough on the eve of the Steelers reporting the training camp for the first time since he announced his retirement back in January. And, you know, it caused a bit of a stir on social media and in talk radio and a lot of debate. And basically, Roethlisberger said, as the first question of the six-pack pointed out, that he basically, it was up in the air last year if he was coming back for the 2021 season. And there was a difference of opinion within the Steelers brain trust, which consisted at that time of Kevin Colbert as the general manager, obviously Mike Tomlin is the head coach, and Art II as the owner. And according to Roethlisberger, Colbert was ready to move on. Tomlin was kind of on the fence. He was okay with Ben moving on, but he was also okay with him playing one more year. And of course, Art II wanted him back. And this is just a guess, but I'm pretty sure Art II had the final say in that little debate. So Ben played one more year last year, and he helped lead the Steelers to the playoffs, and they lost. And he announced his retirement a couple weeks later, and here we are today. Believe it or not, this interview and these quotes did not surprise me one bit. As far as I was concerned, it was just a matter of time before Roethlisberger said these kind of things, because this is what most great athletes or once great athletes say after they retire, almost immediately after they retire. I wanted to come back, but it was there. They didn't necessarily want me to come back, and he also said, I think I can play another year. My arm feels good. My body feels good, but it's just a matter of, do I want to make the sacrifices in the day-to-day and and go through the day-to-day grind of preparing for a season, keeping my body in shape to play, and of course taking the abuse that you take when you play football. He said, the typical things, and basically what he said was, I could play another year if I really my arm feels good. I can continue to play, and this is what they all say, especially right after they retire. Every athlete thinks they can still play another year. What did Mickey say to Rocky and Rocky 2? Every pug thinks they have one last fight in them. And that's how most professional athletes think, especially legendary ones, iconic figures like Ben Roethlisberger certainly was when he played, or is right now as an ex-player. It shouldn't be a surprise. The guy's been doing this, meaning playing football, I'm guessing since about the age of 7 or 8. This has been his whole life for 30 years. And you're asking him 6 months after he retired, days before the Steelers' first training camp without him as a player, you're asking him these questions. And of course he's gonna say that he could continue to play. I'm sure this has been a difficult couple of weeks for him as training camp has approached. It was probably easier for him to deal with retirement in the winter time, in the spring, when he didn't have to, work out and get his body ready. He could just relax and spend time with his family, spend time with his friends, golf, whatever it is that Big Ben likes to do when he's not preparing to play football. But as training camp has approached, I'm sure he's gotten that itch, and I'm sure, he's probably a little bit depressed about it. I mean, again, this has been his life for the last 30 years. Football has been his purpose for forever, basically his entire life. And now he can't do that anymore. And yes, he has all the money in the world he'll ever need, but he probably feels a little bit lost and a little bit dejected right now. So, it's and as I always say, when it comes to a professional athlete, the ego is the last thing to go. And it was pretty obvious last year that, and maybe even the year before, that Ben Roethlisberger was at the tail end of his career, and it was ready for him to move on. And he did. As far as the brain trust and the different opinions, well, Kevin Colbert's the general manager. It's his job to be practical. It's his job to worry about the salary structure, the roster composition. And, lest you forget, last offseason, the 2021 offseason, the Steelers were in salary cap hell. I mean, they had some major issues. The cap was less than it normally is because of COVID. And they had to make a lot of tough decisions. They had to let some free agents go. And Roethlisberger counted a lot against the cap. And that's why they asked them to take a pay cut. And it might have been even a little bit better if he walked away. They could have maybe started their future sooner. So that's how Kevin Colbert was looking at things. As far as Tomlin, well, he's a coach, right? And yet maybe part of him was saying, yeah, it's probably time to move on. But the coach in him, the guy with the tunnel vision, the guy who can't see past the next game, he was probably thinking, this guy, I could still win games with him. He could still give me a chance to win games. And you saw what Roethlisberger did last year. He led them to however many comeback wins. He looked like he was shot for 3/4 of every game, basically. But in the fourth quarter, if the game was close, he more often than not found a way to bring them back and win the game. So, that's how Tomlin was viewing things. As for Art II, I mean, he was probably looking at it from a PR standpoint. This is one of the best players the Steelers have ever had. arguably the best player in franchise history, responsible for so many great memories. For a lot of fans out there, he's the only quarterback that they know. Do I want this guy, this iconic player, to go out without the pomp and circumstance, without the send-off, in front of empty stadiums? Because you remember 2020, there were no fans in the stands, at least very few fans in the stands. Did he want him to go out that way, or did he want to give the fans a chance to say goodbye? And which obviously they did in Week 17, that great Monday night game against the Browns, a great send-off, Ben crying, the fans were going, just so emotional in the stands. You didn't know if he would ever play again beyond Week 18, which he did. They made it to the playoffs. So you could see why these three guys had the opinions that they had about Roethlisberger. And I'm sure Kevin Colbert was like, see you, Ben. I'm sure he was torn, but according to Ben, he seemed to be the one that was the most ready to move on. Well, he's the most practical of the three. If you think about what their job descriptions are, it's Colbert's job not to be emotional in any way when it comes to his job. Any general manager, they have to be practical. They have to be, black and white in a lot of ways with how they make their decisions. Can we fit this guy into our financial structure? Will this prevent us from building a competitive team for 2021? And Tomlin, again, he has a tunnel vision. He's just looking at it. Well, how can this guy could probably help me win more than any of the other quarterbacks we have? And again, Art's thinking of the legacy, I'm guessing. So, and the fans and the ratings and the gate at Heinz Field. So it wasn't a shock that Ben said the things that he said. This is what they all say. I can still play again, or I can still play, I should say. My arm feels great. There's a great clip out there from Terry Bradshaw from like the mid 80s, like 85, 86, somewhere in there. An NFL Films interview where he's like, man, if I could play 2 more minutes, I know I could do it. Just put me out there, put my boys around me, put the opposing defense out there, and let me see their eyes, get big as I call out plays. Oh man, the hair standing up on the back of my neck. That's Bradshaw saying these things. I know I could play 2 more minutes for sure. So they all think they can do that. So, I realize this, as a lot of things do in 2022 in the social media age, this interview that Ben did with Ron Cook, it caused fans and the media once again to choose sides. How dare you, Kevin Colbert? You did Ben wrong, or Ben, how dare you, Ben? The Steelers gave you 18 years. They let you come back for 1 more year. How dare you come up? But again, this is, that's why I harp so much on history, because if you learn history, you don't freak out so much when you see these things, because this was classic. This is classic post-retirement stuff that just about every player says. So those are my thoughts on what Ben Roethlisberger said to Ron Cook in that Post-Gazette interview. That's topic number 1. Topic number 2 is about another interview that a Steeler did, and that's a newer Steeler. That's a Steeler who's integral to the team's future, and that's running back Najee Harris, who was on the Rich Eisen show last week and talked about his willingness to be a workhorse, to get as many touches as the team wants him to have. That's been a big concern with the fans, with the media, when it comes to Harris, but when it comes to any starting running back for the Steelers, really, over the last 15 years, is the workload of the starting running back. But Harris said he seemed more than eager to take on whatever workload they were willing to give him, and that might come back to hurt him in 5 years, but we're not at that point right now. Right now, we're it's 2022, and Harris is coming into a second year and he looks like he's going to be a star running back, somebody capable of being, maybe being one of the leaders in every category. And this is his time. And, I said this back in like the mid 2010s when Le'Veon Bell was at the height of his powers. I said, if something happens to Ben, or if he decides to retire tomorrow, then they need to keep Bell around, because they're going to have somebody to build their offense around without a proven quarterback. Of course, Bell, he kind of lost it as far as his physical abilities by about 2017 or so. And as you know, he's never been the same since. But Harris isn't there right now, and he may never be there. He might be Frank Gore. He might be Adrian Peterson. He might be that durable. But you can't think that far ahead anyway. Right now, you have to think about 2022. And like I've said in the past, until the Steelers have a quarterback, or find a quarterback that they can depend on, that can lead the offense, they don't have that guy. Until they have him, they don't have him, if you know what I mean. Right now, we know who's in contention for that role, but until somebody steps up and proves himself, well, they're going to need somebody else from another position to build the offense around. And who better than a bell cow running back, and that's Harris. So it was nice to hear him say these things, and saying with such confidence that he's willing to be that guy. He's willing to take on whatever workload they need him to have, because I think he's going to be very important for them in 2022. And he has a chance to be their leader this year as far as the offense. And as we talked about in the past, he has a chance to be their leader in the locker room. In fact, that's what Mike Tomlin mentioned on his podcast a few weeks ago with Ryan Clark, is that he and Cam are kind of grooming him to be a captain. So, that tells you what Tomlin thinks of Najee Harris and his future with the team. So, the locker room is one thing, but the field is another. And I have a feeling that they're going to be relying heavily on Najee Harris in 2022. So that's topic number 2. Topic number 3 is, as I believe it was Kathy Ford, I forget who mentioned it. Let's see who mentioned it. Anyway, they praised me for my Mason Rudolph birthday article. And the reason why I wrote that, the thing that set me off with that is, I wasn't surprised that the fans, when the Steelers posted happy birthday to Mason Rudolph on, I guess it was Sunday, I wasn't surprised at the derogatory comments from the fans. But the thing that really set me off was when somebody posted the GIF of Rudolph getting his head knocked off by Earl Thomas in that Ravens game. Remember they had to remove his face mask, and you were uncertain of he was knocked out on the field. Unlike when Myles Garrett hit him in the helmet and he kept going, he kept fighting. In this particular play, he was actually knocked out for a spell. And this person said, it's time for you to lay down and relax. I mean, to me, that's what set me off. And, I don't know if you noticed this about me this offseason, but I've been rallying behind Mason Rudolph. And, it's multi-layered as to why I'm doing that. Do I think Mason Rudolph has a great chance to be the starter? Not necessarily. That might not be a sincere thing coming from me when I do say things like that. Do I think it would be a great story? Yes. Do I think would I be upset if he won the job based on merit? No. I'm looking for them to find the best guy, and if it happens to be Mason Rudolph, great. But another reason why I'm doing this is because I'm trying to catalog a bunch of reactions from fans, because you might not know it right now, but if Mitch Trubisky and or Kenny Pickett fails to come through, whether it be this year or in the near future, you're going to be treating that person that quarterback just like you're treating Mason Rudolph now. You're going to be cruel. You're going to be vicious. You're going to be personal. And that goes hand in hand. That's just how it is with fans and quarterbacks of any fan base, any team in the NFL. That's just how it is, and you might not think that right now. Oh, what we love Mitch. He's jacked. I saw the picture of him working out without a shirt. He is just as jacked as Lamar Jackson. That's great. But he hasn't played for the Steelers yet. So you love him. You're infatuated with him right now. Obviously, Kenny Pickett's first round pick, University of Pittsburgh. It's natural to be excited about him. There's goodwill with both of those guys. But at one point, there was a little bit of goodwill with Mason Rudolph, back in 2018. I remember people were kind of like siding with him when Big Ben came out on his radio show and said, I wish I would have picked somebody else in the third round instead of a quarterback, So, there was once goodwill with Mason Rudolph, just like there was once goodwill with Landry Jones, That's just, but it's like, like when you first start dating somebody, they tell you the things you have to look out for. How does this person act with the wait staff? Like when you're out to dinner, how do they act with their family? Right. Well, if you're Mitch Trubisky or Kenny Pickett, you should probably have a pretty good idea of how fans act with quarterbacks they don't like. And they're giving you a great example with the way they're talking about Mason Rudolph right now. So that's kind of like the third reason why I've been rallying behind Mason Rudolph this offseason, So I just want to because it's just funny how people try to rationalize things, like when they get really personal, and that's what it is with the fan quarterback relationship. It's really personal. Like, how some fans seem to really be personal with certain players that aren't quarterbacks. Like there was this one reader on Behind the Star Curtain that just, when Bud Dupree was playing for the Steelers, this guy just hated Dupree. Like a lot of fans thought Dupree was a bust and he was a disappointment as a first round pick. But this guy just really took it to a whole new level. So much so, in fact, that I said to him one time, does he owe you money? Did he steal your girlfriend in college? I mean, what is it about Bud Dupree that, but when it comes to quarterbacks, that's how a lot of fans act with the quarterback. They're really take it personal, and they really get vindictive in their criticisms. They go above and beyond. And I guess that's just how it is. And I think most of these guys know it, but it probably doesn't make it any easier for them to deal with or for their families to witness. So I just wanted to kind of like, just, because when people say, when you call them out for being mean to Rudolph on his birthday, they say things like, well, I mean, he's just a bad quarterback. I don't think he's a very good quarterback. Okay, fine. But do you have to be mean to him? Do you have to be personal on his birthday? That doesn't make any sense. That's childish. That's immature. I mean, like a lot of people who are doing this are like middle-aged, like older than I am. Like, what's wrong with you? Don't you have grandchildren? And that's just so that's how it's going to be with Kenny Pickett or Mitch Trubisky. It's going to be just that way, because it was that way with every quarterback between Bradshaw and Ben. We know how it was. I remember when the playoff loss to the Raiders, they got blown out in '83 in the divisional round. Cliff Stott was the quarterback, and Mark Malone came in at the very end and kind of mopped up. And I remember, my family came over it was New Year's Eve, and we're talking about it, and we're like, man, they should have let Mark Malone come in earlier. He's a former first-round pick. Well, by '84, even though he took him to the AFC Championship game, Mark Malone sucked. He stunk as far as the fans were concerned, and they wanted David Woodley, who they traded for. By '85, they wanted Scott Campbell, who was like a mid-round pick in '84. He was a third stringer in '85 when both Woodley and Malone were hurt. They wanted him to be the quarterback, and then by '86, nobody knew who Scott Campbell was anymore. Then it was Bobby Brister, and then it was Todd Blackledge that they liked because they went out and acquired him. And then they drafted Neil O'Donnell in 1990, and he was everybody's new favorite. And then it was back to Bubby again. And and then it was back to Neil O'Donnell. But then in '94, they went out and signed Mike Tomczak. And I'll never forget this. By '94, the fans had already fallen out of favor with, like Neil O'Donnell. The love affair, if there ever was one with Neil O'Donnell, was over by '94. And they signed him in that offseason, 1994. And there was a preseason game at Three River Stadium, and I was working or out with friends or something. Like by '94, by that point in my life, I was over preseason football. It was like, learning about how wrestling that wasn't real anymore. Like, all right, I'm over I'm a young 20-something guy. I want to go out and have fun. I didn't care about preseason, but I remember watching the highlights of the game. I don't know who they were playing. It doesn't matter if they won or lost. Doesn't matter. But one of the highlights of the game was a scramble by Mike Tomczak. And, he put his head down and knocked somebody over. It was a great play. And the fans at Three Rivers stood up and cheered for Tomczak like it was like Clemente just had his 3,000th hit. And I knew exactly what that meant right then and there. This was going to be their guy. They were going to be calling for him to start in place of O'Donnell all year. And sure enough, by the end of the year, O'Donnell missed a couple of games with an injury. And it was a great year for Pittsburgh. But and Tomczak came in and replaced O'Donnell, won those games. And then O'Donnell came back. And it was a late season win against the Eagles. It was low scoring. It was a struggle. And at some point, you could hear the fans chanting, "We want Mike. We want Mike." So that's just how it is. Until you prove you can win a Super Bowl or be good enough to do that, the fans are not going to be the love affair is not going to last long, and that's how it's going to be with Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett. So that's why I've been so pro Mason this offseason. It's just trying to prove a point. All right. I have one more thing I want to talk about before I get into the six-pack questions, if you guys have any, and that's the Madden rating that came out the other day. TJ Watt was rated 96 for the 2022 version of Madden. Myles Garrett 99. I don't know what any of that means. All I know is it's fiction. It doesn't matter. I didn't even bother to research it because I don't care. Because it's not real football. We all know how good TJ Watt is. We all know what he means to the Steelers. Just be glad that he's a Steeler and he's so special. And it cracks me up when people say, people get mad about it. Like, who cares? Even if you play the game, even if you play video games, why do you care that TJ Watt is ranked lower than Myles Garrett? Like, why does it matter at all? You know what TJ Watt can do. And, I love when people say things like, oh, this is going to fire him up. Like, how much more validation and respect does this guy need? Meaning TJ Watt. He just signed the richest non-quarterback contract in Steeler history. They decided to break policy, and they guaranteed him $80 million. His great grandchildren are going to be set for life. Well, maybe that's too far back, but certainly great grandchildren are going to be set for life. And he just won the most prestigious award any defender in the NFL can win. He was named the NFL Defensive Player of the Year. How much more does he need as far as respect and validation? If this bothers him at all, then I have to question his mental makeup, to be honest with you. It's just another example of the NFL and the grip that they have on us. That, this kind of stuff used to be like a niche thing that you would like debate for 5 minutes. Now it takes up a whole day of sports debate. It's amazing how the NFL has us right where they want us, and they're not letting go anytime soon. And it's just funny to me. So Those are all my topics I wanted to talk about. And now I'll round out the show with some questions and comments to see if we have any, let's see, here's one from Evan Gallus and from YouTube. He says, I find it crazy that Ben's first regular season game in his career was against the Ravens in M&T Bank Stadium. And it was also his final regular season game against them. Yeah, that's something that I don't think gets talked about that much. I mean, I guess the odds of it happening are pretty good because, it's a division rival. But yeah, Ben made his debut. He came in for an injured Tommy Maddox in the second half of the Week 2 game in 2004. Looked pretty good. And then, the rest is history. And then, of course, last year, his last regular season game was in Baltimore at M&T Bank Stadium. And, of course, he helped lead them to the playoffs with an overtime win. So it is cool that things kind of bookended that way for him. Steelers Pittsburgh says Harris said he would take 500 touches if it means wins. Yeah, it's probably not going to happen, but this is his time. He might not feel the same way 5 years from now, but right now, I mean, when you're that age, 24, 25, however old Najee Harris is, you feel invincible and you're ready to take on the world, and that's what he looks like right now. So if he can be their offensive leader for a couple of years, hey, I'm on board with that. That's for sure. Javier More says, I thought Hines made a deal to still be featured. I think they did. They made a 5-year deal. I think they're still gonna have a sponsorship with they're still partnering with the Steelers, or with I should say Acrisure Stadium. They're partnering with them to have a presence at Acrisure Stadium. I guess like maybe the Heinz Red Zone or something like that. Like one of the ketchup bottles will still be featured inside the stadium. So, they work things out. Maybe not to the liking of the fans who wanted to stay Heinz Field, but business is business. So you get maybe the best of both worlds. You still get the Heinz Field or the Heinz Red Zone, and the Steelers get a boatload of money and the ability to make some improvements at their home park. All right, let's scroll on down here. Steelers Pittsburgh says, I'm a Mason fan. I still don't get why people want him cut from the Steelers. I don't either. I mean, to me, you know that Mitch and Kenny are going to make the team. And if you need a third string quarterback, you're going to need a third string quarterback. Why not somebody who's had 16, 17 starts? Mason might not be Joe Montana or Ben Roethlisberger, but he's pretty good for a backup. And, if push comes to shove and you need somebody to start for one reason or another, I'd rather have him than some unknown 7th round pick or some, washed up veteran. And he's not going to cost him all that much. When people say get rid of Mason Rudolph for a 7th round pick, to me, I'd rather have the quarterback than the 7th round pick. Call me crazy, but that's just how I am. Brian Brown says, I like Mason Rudolph. I think he can do just as well as the other two. Najee in the run game is the key. Yeah. Well, I don't know about the first part, Brian. That remains to be seen. I'm hoping that Kenny Pickett or Mitch Trubisky or Mason Rudolph, whatever. But I'm hoping somebody takes the bull by the horns and really takes advantage of this competition and just blows by the other two, because I think that's what's best for business for the Steelers. As far as Najee and the running game being the key, I couldn't agree more. Of course, the offensive line is going to have to pull its weight and come through and be a lot better than it was the last 2 years. But I think they have people in place now for them to be better than they were the last 2 years. I mean, obviously they have basically a whole new group from 2020, and they made improvements on on what they had last year, especially on the interior with Cole and Daniels. And, you got a whole rookie year's worth of experience with Dan Moore and, Kevin Dotson. There's a lot to like about him. And Kendrick Green's been switched over to guard, and he got some experience last year. Not great experience. He struggled mightily, but he definitely got he got to know what it was like to be a NFL player. So hopefully he was able to learn from that and grow from that, because he certainly was in the fire last year. There's no doubt about it. All right. George Teston says, I think it would be a mistake to trade Rudolph this year unless they got at least a 4th rounder. Well, that's going to be a tall order to get that for Rudolph. I mean, you saw what the Browns parted ways with to get, what the Panthers traded to get Baker Mayfield. So you might not get a 4th or a 5th for Rudolph, but I mean, considering the success rate of low round picks, what I'm talking about like a 7th round pick. If to me, just give me the player, because you never know when you're going to need him. 3 years ago, who would have thought Devlin Hodges would be somebody that the fans would be counting on, the team would be counting on to win games for them, and that turned out to be the case. So you just never know what can transpire during a season. This one is from Steelers Pittsburgh again. I hope Pickett does well, but he hasn't played against NFL athletes. I've seen many a first-round quarterback flounder. Well, that's true. Hopefully he proves to be the Dan Marino that they never had, and that would be fantastic. All right. Let's see. Shane giggles what they have to say. And welcome, Shane, from YouTube. I only remember 3 games of Neil O'Donnell, Colts AFC Championship game, Chargers AFC Championship game, and the 3 picks Super Bowl versus the Cowboys. They're the only ones you remember, or the only ones that stick in your mind? Because that's a pretty I'm sure you watched some other games, but I think the one game that people remember O'Donnell for was the last game, and that was Super Bowl 30. And, it's not hard to understand why. Shane Giggle says, congratulations to TJ. He just got married. That's right. I mean, the guy's on top of the world. He's got $80 million. He's got a NFL Defensive Player of the Year award sitting on his mantle. He's got a beautiful wife. I'm sure maybe they'll have a family. JJ Watts' brother, Derek Watts' brother. He's NFL royalty. I mean, a video game, who cares? I mean, gosh, I think a lot of times fans, they take on the slight for themselves. They take the slight personally and act like they're the ones being slept on, so to speak. But it's it's like I used to say about Ben. People would always get bent out of shape over these silly quarterback rankings, and it always seemed like Ben was ranked 1 or 2 spots lower than he should have been. And this is like during the prime of his career. I'm not talking about the last 4 or 5 years, like the absolute prime of his career. I think Carson Palmer is a better quarterback. And I got why people thought that was ridiculous, but I wouldn't have taken it personal. You knew what you had in Ben, and you knew how important a guy like that was. So just be glad you got him on your team. Who cares where he's ranked? As long as he's holding up that Lombardi at the end of the year, or has his team in contention to win one, that's the main thing. Dark Storm says it's filler news. Well, to me, that's an indictment of the other sports. The fact that they have not been able to capture the imaginations of the fans. Baseball should be, of course, that's the Pirates' fault, but also there are a lot of fans out there who don't even care about the Pirates because they're not from Pittsburgh, but they don't seem to, doesn't matter what city, baseball seems to be on the decline. So the NFL is just taking over. And this one is from Jubine. When will the kid from Pitt get the keys to the offense? Well, I'm thinking the Steelers want him to get them in year 2, ideally, but I'd be on the lookout for that at some point in year 1, unless Mitch Trubisky is great. Then he'll probably sit for a whole year, or until maybe there's a late season game that doesn't matter for the Steelers and they want Pickett to get some experience, then maybe you'll see him then. Kathy Ford says, of the 6 questions for the second, when does the offseason end and the season start? When Jeff takes off the hood. Well, I believe that'll be training camp. But in all seriousness, in my opinion, the offseason ends when training camp starts. That's how I've always looked at it. Because if you're a football fan, if you're a big football fan like I am, and there were years when the NFL offseason felt like a huge desert of nothingness, and you filled the void with other things. And there's a lot of good and bad in that. And I think the good is when you don't have to argue about TJ Watt's Madden rating. That's, if you could find good things to fill the void with. But for the longest time, like for years, it just felt like, oh my gosh, the NFL season's never going to get here. Well, when training camp started, even back in the 80s, 90s, whenever, well, they covered it every day. Maybe not like they do now, but they covered it every day. So you had news stories to read, you had things to watch on ESPN or the local nightly sports report. So to me, that's always when the off season ends, because that's when you officially begin preparation for the regular season. All the players have to be there. If they're not there, they're in breach of contract, or they're holding out because they don't have a contract. But the point is, that's when work really starts for the players. So that's when, in my opinion, the offseason ends. And this is from Brian Brown. Do you think the tight end Raider can still make the team? Is he still on the team? He's still on the roster. Can he make the team? Well, that depends on what Connor Hayward is able to do as a rookie in training camp. He's a very versatile player coming out of Michigan State, but, he's also undersized for a tight end. So to me, he's going to have to really wow them and do things that are kind of unusual for a player of his skill set. Obviously they can use him as an H-back, as a running back, as a returner. But unless he can really fill the void of a tight end, even if he still makes the team, I can see them kind of switching his position and signing somebody else to be the third tight end. Because unless he can really truly play that position like they need him to play it, it's just hard to imagine him being a tight end, even a third string tight end at that size, 5'11". It just does. I just can't see it right now. But then again, what do I know? All right. It isn't Kenny's ability to play, but if the O-line can support him, that's true. But the one thing about truly great quarterbacks, I'm not saying Kenny Pickett's that yet. We have no idea. But I've heard it said, and I kind of believe this because we saw it for many years with Ben until his wheels fell off. A great quarterback can make up for a substandard offensive line. I've heard that said, and I think that's true. So, we saw it with Joe Burrow. Like, yeah, he got sacked a lot last year, but he still dazzled. He was still a fantastic quarterback. And, we've seen it for years with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, how many times has that guy been just beaten up? But he's a great how many times has he been the MVP? So a great quarterback can make up for a poor O-line. Now, a great running back can't necessarily make up for a poor O-line, but a great quarterback can. So, all right, this is another one from Brian Brown. He says, yes, see, now I'm ready to watch some Steelers football. Looking forward to TJ Watt sacking Joe Burrow over and over until Burrow looks hopeless and dejected. Well, I mean, considering how much or how emphatically the Bengals have beaten up the Steelers recently, that would be a certainly would be a welcome change because the only people that have looked hopeless against when those two teams line up are the guys wearing the black and gold and their fans. Like last year, that one game, wow, that was a massacre. This is from Bill Frost. I think I might know him. Yes. Emily wants to know when you are going to hang out with us at Mexicasa. Yes. Whenever you want, Bill. My buddy Bill from, I'm not going to say where. But, yeah. Whenever you want, Bill. It doesn't exist anymore, though. But there's another place there. But anytime. Just look me up on Facebook. Those are some of my fans. All right. With that in mind, I think I will call it a night. I'll end the night with Bill's comment. You can catch us at Mexicasa or the place that's whatever it's called now. But until I talk to you again on Monday and on Hangover, you guys have a great weekend. And as always, go Steelers. Take care, everybody. Have a great night.